The first time I heard the knocking, I thought it was a raven dropping shells on dead cedar. The second time, I thought it was another man. The third time, I understood it was answering me. Just 3 hollow knocks coming from somewhere deep inside the Hoh Rainforest. Exactly the same way I had tapped my boot against the boardwalk that morning while waiting for my field partner to finish packing his camera gear. Knock. Knock? Knock. Then silence so complete that even the rain seemed to pause above the trees. I was standing ankle-deep in mud with a tranquilizer rifle in my hands, looking at a wall of moss and cedar so thick it seemed less like forest and more like the inside of some old, breathing animal, when something behind that green darkness knocked 3 times again. And somewhere behind me, my field partner whispered, "It learned that from you." But I need to tell you how we got there. My name is Everett Cole. I was a wildlife biologist for 19 years. Most of that spent working in Western Washington, studying elk movement, black bear patterns, and the way large mammals use old-growth corridors in and around Olympic National Park. I was not a ghost hunter, not a storyteller, not one of those men who sees eyes in every shadow because he wants the world to be stranger than it is. I believed in tracks. My wife used to say I trusted animals more than people, because animals never pretended to be anything else. She was right. I could forgive a bear for being a bear. I could forgive a cougar for waiting in a tree line with hunger in its body. What I could never forgive was something that watched like a man and moved like it had never had to be one. This happened in the Hoh Rainforest, on the western side of Olympic National Park, where the trees grow so tall and heavy with moss that daylight comes down green. If you have never stood under those old-growth Sitka spruce and western hemlock, you may think forest is forest. It is not. The Hoh is different. It does not merely surround you. It absorbs you. Rain falls there, not like weather, but like a condition of existence. Moss hangs from branches in long, wet curtains. Nurse logs lie across the ground like the bodies of fallen giants. And younger trees grow out of them, feeding on death without apology. Everything there is soft and rotting and alive. Even the silence has roots. We were called in late September after 3 elk were found dead off a remote drainage north of the main tourist trails. That alone was not unusual. Cougars kill. Bears scavenge. Disease moves through herds. Old bulls fight and tear themselves open in the rut. Nature is not gentle just because people paint it on postcards. But the ranger who radioed it in used a phrase I had never heard in an official report. He said, "The carcasses are arranged." Arranged. That word made me drive out before dawn. My field partner, Marcus Bell, rode with me. Marcus was younger than me by nearly 15 years. A former military photographer who had come into wildlife survey work after he got tired of documenting human damage. He was quiet, broad-shouldered, and careful with equipment in the way some men are careful with weapons. He had a daughter in Tacoma and kept a picture of her taped inside his hard case, next to memory cards and lens cloths. We reached the Hoh before sunrise. The rain had been falling all night, thin and steady. Not storm, rain.
Patient rain.
The kind that finds every seam in your jacket and every old injury in your bones.
At the ranger station, we met a seasonal ranger named Nolan. He looked too young to have the face he had that morning.
Pale, tight around the mouth.
His eyes kept sliding toward the tree line as if he expected something to step out while we were talking. He showed us the location on a map. Off-trail, beyond a closed maintenance spur, near a drainage that fed toward the Hoh River. No public access. No reason for hikers to be there. No campsites nearby?
Poachers,
Marcus asked.
Nolan shook his head.
No bullet wounds?
No arrows.
No traps.
Predator.
He looked at me. That's why I called you.
We loaded our gear and started in just after 7.
The first mile was ordinary rainforest work. Wet brush, slick roots,
Mud that tried to keep your boots.
The trail faded fast once we left the old spur road. Sword ferns crowded our legs. Every branch seemed designed to pour cold water down the back of the neck.
The trees stood so massive around us that distance became hard to judge.
A spruce might look 50 yards away and turn out to be 200.
That happens in old growth.
Scale lies. About 40 minutes in, Marcus stopped and lifted one hand.
I stopped behind him.
What?
He pointed upward.
At first, I saw only branches and moss. Then I saw the birds, not moving. Dozens of small birds perched in the trees above us.
Varied thrush, wrens, chickadees, all of them sitting still. No fluttering, no calling,
No feeding, just facing the same direction.
north. Their bodies were small dark commas against the green. Storm pressure.
The rain was steady. No wind. No shift.
No, I said. The birds remained motionless as we passed beneath them. Every single one turned its head to follow us. Not its body, just the head. That was the first wrong thing.
The carcasses were in a shallow depression beside a fallen cedar so large we had to climb over part of it.
3 Roosevelt elk.
A cow, a yearling, and a bull calf.
I had seen cougar kills.
I had seen bears open an animal like a man unzipping a coat.
I had seen wolves leave the ground trampled with struggle and blood. This was none of that. The elk had been placed in a row, nose to tail, facing west.
Their bodies were intact except for the heads.
All 3 heads had been turned completely around. Not removed, not torn off. Turned.
I do not mean twisted a little in death. I mean the necks were rotated far beyond anything bone and tendon should allow.
So each animal's face pointed back toward its own spine. There was no feeding, no torn belly, no exposed organs, no claw pattern I recognized.
Just 3 dead animals arranged like a message written in muscle. Marcus lowered his camera without taking a picture.
Nolan turned away and gagged.
I crouched beside the cow first. Her eyes were open, rain collecting in them.
There were deep pressure bruises under the jaw and behind the skull. Something had gripped her head and forced it around. with strength beyond anything I knew in those woods. I checked the ground. That was where reason began leaving me.
Around the carcasses, the mud was clean.
No struggle marks?
No elk tracks.
No predator tracks.
No sliding grooves where the bodies had been dragged. 3 elk had somehow died and appeared in that depression without marking the saturated earth around them.
That was impossible.
The Hoh holds footprints like memory. A squirrel leaves evidence there. A boot can remain visible for days if the rain does not wash it flat.
But whatever had arranged those elk had either left no track or knew exactly where not to step. Then Marcus found the first print. Not beside the bodies. Above them.
On the trunk of the fallen cedar.
A wet impression in green moss 5 feet above ground level. Long, broad, almost human, but too long in the midfoot. The toes were spread wide, pressed deep into moss, as if something heavy had stepped sideways along the log without slipping. Marcus took photographs while I measured.
17.5 inches from heel to longest toe.
I have measured bear tracks all my life. A bear's hind foot can fool a frightened man into seeing something human. This was not bear. The pressure points were wrong. The toe alignment was wrong. The weight distribution was wrong. It looked like a bare human foot made by someone who had only heard humans described.
Is it a person?
I said no. Then after a moment, because honesty still mattered to me then, I added, but it is standing like one. We documented the scene for nearly an hour. Photos, measurements, hair caught on bark. Soil from under the cedar. I kept waiting for a reasonable explanation to appear through the rain.
1. While Marcus worked, I noticed something carved into the moss on the side of the fallen cedar.
Not carved with a knife. Pressed. 3 circular depressions in a vertical line. Each one about the size of a thumb. Knock marks. No, that is what I called them later. At the time, they were just marks. I touched one with my gloved hand. The moss beneath it was crushed flat and black. Fresh. From somewhere deeper in the drainage, 3 hollow knocks answered. Knock, knock, knock. Nolan jumped so hard his radio clipped against his belt. Marcus turned slowly. The sound had come from beyond the cedar, farther north, where the drainage narrowed and the old trees crowded so close their branches braided together. A woodpecker can knock. A raven can drop things. A limb can hit a hollow trunk in the wind. But there was no wind. And the spacing was too exact. Then 3 more. I did what trained men do when something does not fit. I made it fit anyway. Pileated woodpecker, I said. Marcus looked at me. We both knew I was lying. If you are listening to this in a place where trees grow thick and old, maybe you already know the kind of sound I mean. Maybe you have heard one knock too many from the wrong direction and told yourself it was a branch. If you have, leave your location somewhere people can see it. Not because I need to collect stories, but because patterns matter. And if this reaches the kind of person who still walks alone into wet timber, share it with him before pride gets him farther in than his instincts can bring him back.
We should have left then.
We did not. There were reasons, of course. There are always reasons men give themselves before doing something stupid. We had a site to document. There could be a diseased predator nearby.
If a human had done it, law enforcement needed evidence.
If an animal had done it, the park needed to know. If it was nothing, then leaving would make us look foolish. That last reason kills more men than most will admit. We followed the drainage north. Not far, maybe half a mile. Enough to find more signs. Enough to convince ourselves we were doing our jobs instead of answering an invitation.
The forest changed as we moved.
The moss grew thicker, hanging in curtains from every branch. The rain softened until it became mist. Our boots made almost no sound. Even our breathing seemed swallowed. The air smelled of wet bark, mushrooms, elk musk, and something sour beneath it. Something like old meat sealed in a plastic bag. We found broken branches at 10 feet, then 12, then higher, not snapped downward like a falling limb, twisted, bent around, wrapped into neighboring branches, as if something with hands had passed through above us and rearranged the canopy while moving. Marcus photographed everything. Nolan kept checking his radio. Static. At one point, we came upon a nurse log split open down the middle. The rotten heartwood had been clawed out and spread across the ground in 2 long lines. Inside the hollow log were bones. Small bones. Birds, mostly. A raccoon jaw. A deer vertebra. And 1 black rubber boot. Child-sized. That was when Nolan said, "I'm done." I did not blame him. We turned back. The drainage should have led us south toward the elk carcasses. We had followed it in a straight line. Water runs downhill. Old men, young rangers, and frightened photographers can all follow water downhill. But after 10 minutes, we came to the same split nurse log again. Same bones. Same boot. Marcus stopped dead. "No," he said. We checked our compass. South pointed into the deepest wall of timber, away from the drainage. North pointed behind us. East and west trembled slightly. My GPS had no signal under the canopy, which was not unusual. The compass behavior. We tried again. This time we marked our path with orange tape. Every 20 paces, I tied a strip to a branch. Obvious. Impossible to miss. After 15 minutes of careful walking, we found our first tape. Then the second. Then the third. We had walked a loop without turning. Nolan began breathing too fast. Marcus put a hand on his shoulder and told him to slow down. I looked at the tape. Each strip had been retied. My knots were simple overhand knots. These were not. Each strip had been folded into a little bow. Neat. Delicate. Almost playful. I stared at those bows hanging in the wet green gloom and felt something old and cold open behind my ribs. Something nearby knocked 3 times. Knock, knock, knock. Then from another direction, 3 more. Then another. All around us, hollow trunks began answering. Not random.
because none of us wanted the number to be more than 1.
Then Marcus lifted his camera toward the trees.
I followed the lens.
High in the fork of a hemlock,
Maybe 30 feet above the ground,
something dark crouched against the trunk.
At first, my mind called it a bear.
It had to.
A black shape, heavy shoulders, wet fur.
But bears do not crouch with both arms wrapped around a trunk and one leg hanging straight down like a man sitting on a porch rail.
Bears do not remain perfectly still while 3 men stare at them.
Bears do not tilt their heads slowly, not toward sound, but toward fear.
The face was hidden behind moss.
Only one eye showed,
Deep set,
dark, reflecting no light. Marcus took one photo.
The camera flash fired. The thing dropped behind the trunk.
Not climbed, dropped. No crash, no branches breaking.
Just gone.
Then the forest erupted. Not with movement. Massive. Nolan ran. I shouted for him, but he was already crashing downhill through ferns. Marcus went after him.
I followed because leaving men in that forest was not an option.
Even when some part of me understood the forest had just learned how to divide us. We found Nolan 60 yards away, standing in the middle of a shallow creek. He was not moving. He was looking at the water. I came up beside him and saw why. The creek was full of footprints. Bare footprints. Large ones. Small ones. Some almost human. Some stretched long and narrow. Some with toes that ended in sharp points. They crossed the creek in both directions, overlapping by the dozens. The prints had not been there when we crossed earlier. I know they had not. Rainwater filled each impression, but did not erase it. The mud looked freshly pressed, the edges sharp, as if a crowd had passed through seconds before and vanished into the trees without sound.
Everett.
He pointed to one print near the bank.
It matched my boot.
Not exactly.
Not tread.
Shape. A bare footprint the length of my boot, but with the same small nick missing from the outer edge where my right sole had split months before. The forest had made a barefoot copy of my step. That was the moment I stopped thinking like a biologist. Science had not abandoned me. I still believed in evidence. But evidence was now telling me something I did not have language for. We moved together after that.
Tight formation.
No more exploring.
No more samples. No more photographs unless something blocked the way.
We followed the creek downstream because water, at least, had a purpose. For a while, it worked. The knocking faded behind us. Birds returned in scattered bursts.
I saw a banana slug on a stump and almost laughed from relief because it was so ordinary.
So beautifully stupid and alive. Then we reached the elk carcasses again. Only they were not as we had left them. The 3 bodies had been moved. Now they stood upright. All 3 of them. Not alive. Not truly standing. Their legs had been forced beneath them. Bodies leaning against one another. Heads still turned backward. dead eyes facing the direction from which we had come.
Rain ran down their faces.
Their mouths held open.
Nolan made a sound like a child.
Don't look at them. But I could not stop. Between the elk, something had been placed on the ground. Marcus's photograph.
The one he had just taken of the dark shape in the tree.
The printed photograph. Wet. Fresh.
Impossible.
Marcus opened his camera with shaking hands.
The memory card was still inside.
No. Portable printer.
No one else with us.
No way!
The photograph on the ground showed the tree fork where the thing had crouched.
But in the image, the thing was not in the tree.
It was behind us. All three of us were visible from the back, standing in the creek, looking down at the footprints. And behind us, no more than 6 feet away, stood a tall figure covered in dark, wet hair.
Its arms hung below its knees. Its head leaned forward over Nolan's shoulder.
Watching what we were watching,
Marcus dropped the photo.
nobody spoke.
Because there are fears you can speak through.
And there are fears that take the language out of your mouth and leave only the animal part of the body waiting for permission to survive.
The false relief came when we heard the helicopter. Faint at first, then closer. A Park Service helicopter, or so we thought, thudding somewhere beyond the canopy.
Nolan laughed once, hard and broken.
Marcus waved his arms upward, even though the trees were too thick. I grabbed the radio and tried again. Static. Then a voice came through. Broken. The voice repeated, "Stay where you are." It was distorted by static, but understandable. Nolan sobbed with relief. I almost did too.
Then Marcus looked at me.
His face had gone gray.
"Everett," he whispered, "we never gave base our position."
The radio clicked again. Stay where you are. No call sign.
No identification. No response to my transmission.
Just the same phrase. Flatter each time.
As if something had learned the shape of the words, but not why humans used them.
The helicopter sound continued above us.
Too steady.
Too low. Then it stuttered.
Not engine stutter.
Mouth stutter.
Then beside us.
Then ahead. Nolan screamed and fired bear spray into empty brush.
A shape moved through the orange cloud without slowing.
I saw only parts. A shoulder sliding between trunks. Wet hair dragging moss. One hand closing around a cedar sapling.
Long fingers.
Black nails.
A wrist thick as my forearm. It did not charge. It did not need to. It simply kept pace with us as we backed away, letting us understand that speed had never been the question. We ran anyway. Not straight, not smart.
We ran like men who had finally remembered they were meat.
Branches tore my face. I lost my hat. My pack snagged and nearly pulled me down. Behind me, Nolan was crying while he ran. Marcus kept shouting, "Left, left, keep left," though left meant nothing anymore. The forest knocked around us.
3 from the right. 3 from the left. 3 ahead. 3 behind.
Then more. Dozens. Maybe hundreds.
The Hoh Rainforest becoming a hollow instrument played by hands we could not see.
We broke through onto the old maintenance spur near dusk. I still do not know how.
1 second, there was only green suffocation.
The next, there was roadbed beneath our boots.
Gravel and older chutes and tire ruts filled with rainwater.
I saw the truck 50 yards away and felt my legs nearly give out. Nolan reached it first. He pulled at the passenger door. Locked.
I had the keys.
I was maybe 20 yards behind him when something stepped from the trees on the far side of the road.
If a bear had learned patience from men.
Tall is the wrong word.
Tall sounds like height alone.
This thing had presence.
Mass.
It made the road feel narrow.
Its shoulders were wide and sloped under wet black-brown hair.
Its head sat low, almost sunk forward into the chest. The arms were too long, the hands too human, the legs bent with impossible power. It did not bare teeth. It did not roar. It just stood between Nolan and the trees and looked at him. Nolan stopped pulling the door handle. His face changed. Not fear, recognition. That was worse. He whispered, "Dad." His father had been dead for 4 years. I learned that later. The thing made no sound. But Nolan heard something. I saw it in his face. He took 1 step toward it. Marcus tackled him from the side. They hit the gravel hard. The thing crossed the road in 2 strides. I raised the tranquilizer rifle and fired. The dart struck its upper chest. I saw it hit it. I saw the yellow tail quiver in the wet hair. The thing looked down at the dart, then looked at me. I had used that dosage for bull elk. It should have slowed any large mammal in minutes. The thing reached up, pinched the dart between 2 fingers, and pulled it free. Carefully, almost gently. Then it placed the dart on the road, pointing toward me. Neatly? That word again. Marcus dragged Nolan toward the truck. I ran backward, fumbling for the keys. The thing watched. It could have taken us. I need you to understand. It could have closed the distance before I opened the door. It could have pulled Nolan apart before Marcus got him into the back seat. It could have flipped the truck, crushed the glass, reached through the windshield, done whatever it wanted. It did none of that. It let us leave. That has bothered me more than any chase would have. I got the engine started. Marcus shouted at me to drive. Nolan curled in the back seat, whispering apologies to a dead man. I reversed too fast. Hit a stump, tore part of the bumper loose, then found the road and drove. In the rearview mirror, the figure stood in the road until the trees swallowed it. Just before the bend, it raised 1 hand, not waving, holding up 3 fingers. Then it knocked those fingers against the side of its own head. Knock, knock, knock. We did not stop until we reached the ranger station. The official report said we encountered evidence of illegal human activity, probable wildlife predation, extreme stress, and navigational confusion under poor weather conditions. The elk carcasses were never recovered. When a larger team went in 2 days later, they found nothing but disturbed moss and 1 strip of orange flagging tied into a bow. Marcus's camera was damaged. The memory card was corrupted.
Every image from that day was unreadable, except one. A photograph of the inside of the truck windshield taken from the outside.
In the picture, the three of us are sitting in the cab before we drove away. I am at the wheel. Marcus is turned toward Nolan. Nolan is curled in the back
And reflected faintly in the glass.
behind the camera.
Is a dark shape standing in the road with its head tilted down,
As if studying how we fit inside. After that, Nolan quit the Park Service. Marcus refused to speak publicly. Though once, after too many drinks, he told me he still heard rotor blades in his sleep, except they came from under his bed. I lasted another year before I resigned. My knees were bad, yes. My back hurt, yes. But the truth is simpler. I could not walk under old trees without feeling watched from above. So, like this account, if it reached the part of you that still knows fear is sometimes a form of wisdom, send it to someone who hikes with headphones in,
or laughs at old warnings.
or thinks a map makes him owner of the land beneath his boots. There are places where being heard is not the same as being safe. I live east of the mountains now, where the air is dry and the trees stand farther apart. People ask if I miss the rainforest. I tell them no. That is not entirely true. Some mornings, when rain taps the roof before sunrise, I remember the smell of cedar and wet earth and elk moving through fog like spirits with breath. I remember why I loved that country before it showed me something older than love. But I do not go back. 3 years ago, a package arrived at my house with no postage mark I could read. Inside was my old field compass, the one I lost in the Hoh. The needle was bent into a little bow. Under it lay a strip of orange flagging, and beneath that, written on wet paper in mud and crushed moss, were 3 dark circles in a vertical line. No words, just the marks. I burned the package in my wood stove. That night, sometime after 2, I woke to knocking. Not at the door, not on the window. Above me, from the attic. Knock, knock, knock. I lay there beside my sleeping wife, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rain begin again over a house hundreds of miles from the Hoh. And from somewhere in the dark above my bedroom,